Hello, explorers. Welcome to Reach the World. For over 20 years, Reach the World has used virtual exchange to inspire youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens. My name is Tim, and today, as part of Reach the World's Explorer program, we're connecting again with a member of the Antarctic Heritage Trust's Inspiring Explorers Expedition to Antarctica. You can find the recordings of past expedition live stream events on the Inspiring Explorers Expedition homepage, along with some wonderful articles written by the explorers themselves. We'll share a link in the YouTube chat bar if you want to check that out. I highly recommend that you do. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Ihlara. Ihlara is one of 5 explorers who recently journeyed together to Antarctica, following in the footsteps of bold early polar explorers. Expedition members each brought something unique to the expedition, and together, they're sharing their experiences in Antarctica with at-home learners through this Reach the World virtual exchange. And Lara is going to focus on nature and some of the cool sounds that she found in Antarctica today. I'm very excited to hear more. The amazing part is that you can join these explorers by joining this virtual expedition. You can visit their expedition exchange homepage with your student or at-home learner. You can read these explorers' articles and then do what you're doing right now. Follow a live stream event and ask your questions to expedition team members. Today's live stream is the final event of this expedition. So if you're not joining us today, you may not have a chance to ask a live question, but you can easily revisit any of our past live stream events with the Inspiring Explorers on Reach the World's YouTube channel. If you're joining our live stream today, please let us know you're here. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us who you are, where you are, and share any questions with our guest by adding your question right into the YouTube chat bar. And so without any delay, let's go on an adventure together. Joining us today from New Zealand is inspiring explorer Lara. Welcome to Reach the World, Lara.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for today.
Excellent, thank you for joining us. We're excited to hear about your experiences in Antarctica. If you want to launch right into it, please feel free.
Cool, I'll just share my presentation with you guys now. Alrighty, hopefully you can all see that. And
yeah, looks great.
Cool. All right, well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat to you about my experiences in Antarctica. And I know you've already been introduced to our expedition by the rest of the team, by Sandra, Lorette, Anzac, and Owain. So I'm going to wrap it up today talking a bit about the nature that we saw down on the Antarctic Peninsula. So I went down to Antarctica with the New Zealand Antarctic Heritage Trust because I'm really interested in music. So I'm a composer. I like to compose works for lots of different instruments. And this opportunity seemed like a really good way to explore the world, hear some super cool sounds from the nature and the animals and the ice that we saw in Antarctica, and share those sounds as a way of sort of preserving and sharing that experience with my community back home. So I thought I'd talk to you a bit about these sounds of nature today. This photo on this slide is from Ushuaia. So I think some of the others in my team have already chatted to you a bit about how we spent a bit longer than anticipated in Ushuaia at the end of our journey. But this was a beautiful space to reflect on the experiences. And so I got to do a bit of composition with this amazing view in the background. So that was pretty cool. Alrighty, so as you know, we left Ushuaia at the beginning of our trip. So that's down the very bottom of South America. This is Sandra and I leaving, excited for our big adventure. And after a couple of days in the Drake Passage, which I think Sandra and Lorette talked to you about, was a pretty challenging experience for some of us, getting used to our life at sea. But after a couple of days, we hit South Shetland Islands. And so this island here is Roberts Island, and this was the first chance we had to go off the boat. We sort of planned on doing a bit of kayaking that day, but it was a bit too rough for that. Although that meant we had heaps of time to go over on a Zodiac and explore the island on foot. And this was one of the most amazing experiences for me because, you know, it was our first time in the Antarctic area, and all of a sudden, like so quickly, we were hit with so many different animals. So we saw elephant seals, fur seals, chinstrap penguins, and gentoo penguins, all in this one point of the island, in a really small area that probably only took about 10 to 15 minutes to walk around. And there were just so many animals all in this one place, all living together. You can see how close the gentoo penguins are to the seals, and sometimes that didn't end super well for them, but for the most part, yeah, we had all these animals living really, really close together, which was super interesting for us to observe. So some of my favorite animals here were these gentoo penguins. I thought they were really funny to watch, and they were really interesting from a composer's perspective. And I'll play you a recording a bit later on, but I thought I'd just show you some photos. So Roberts Island is both rocky and has a lot of ice and snow on it. So the penguins and all the animals there have quite varied terrains that they live on. I thought this was quite interesting, seeing the snow or the ice that the penguins are on. You'll notice that it's a little bit pink. So that is because of the penguin poop, the guano. It's pink because the penguins eat so much krill, and that makes the ice that they live on that colour. It's pretty interesting to see. Also on this island, which amazed us as visitors, is that there were these little penguin highways, these tracks that the penguins always use to go up the hill or go across the island. And so they use them so often that they become these highway routes that the penguins walk on. And so while we were exploring the island, we had to be careful looking out for these routes so we didn't block the penguins on their journeys. And I think we'll be able to see a little video of them waddling along up the hill. Hopefully that's working. Oh, and then someone accidentally walking across. But yeah, so they waddle along up the hill, and I was super impressed with how they can climb so high up the hill. I'll show you a photo shortly, but it's quite funny watching their big long tails sort of waving side to side as they waddle along, but they can actually get quite fast. Oops. And so eventually they climb all the way up the hill. You can see it's a bit unclear because it's quite far away, but all these penguins on the hillside, you know, hundreds of them, which was super impressive. And it was amazing sort of standing at the bottom of this hill and just listening to the chorus of sound. And so that was really exciting for me as a composer, just seeing how they interacted with each other. And I'm going to play you a recording that I took shortly. And I think it's really interesting. We hear lots of sound going on, and then there's just one penguin that sort of starts a chant, and then the rest of them almost mimic it and follow it. And I'm not entirely sure what they're doing here, but it was really interesting to observe. So I'll just play that now. Hopefully you can hear it. Oh, hopefully that works. Oops. There we go, we'll move on. So I thought it was really interesting hearing all those sounds, and how we'll have this one sort of chant or rhythm pop out of the masses, and then everything else sort of seems to assimilate to that sound. It was something I didn't expect to hear. I sort of expected just this cacophony of noise from the penguins, but really interesting listening to those rhythms. So after the South Shetland Islands, we then moved on and sailed towards mainland Antarctica, so going further south. And this was one of the first vistas we had of mainland Antarctica, which was pretty surreal for us. I thought I'd just show you a little video of us from the ship observing the amazing scenery around us. I think the others have talked a bit about this as well, but one of the things that was most moving in this visit to Antarctica was realizing just how small we are in this huge, vast space. That was quite overwhelming at times, but also really interesting to think about how small we feel in that space, but what a big impact we as humans are having on this environment as well. Really interesting to reflect on. Oops. All right, so once we got we're closer to mainland Antarctica, we managed to get in the water on our kayaks. So this is Sandra and I on our kayaks. And one of the first things that we noticed within about 30 seconds of getting in the water are these amazing creatures that float in the water underneath us. So I'll show you this video. So these things are called salps. And they kind of look like jellyfish, but they're quite different from jellyfish actually. They have much more complex nerve and digestive systems. But we got in the water and looked down, and it was just full of these amazing strings of jelly and these little red shapes in the water. To give you an idea, this is what they look like out of the water. Quite strange, we'd never seen anything like it before. But salps are really quite common in the Antarctic region. They're a food source for lots of different animals. So salp numbers are increasing in Antarctica, while krill, which is another really common food source, is decreasing for a number of reasons, largely due to just human fishing. Krill is used for like supplement tablets and pet food. So as the krill numbers decrease, the salps are being turned to as a food source for a lot of other animals. But really interesting to see, we'd never seen anything like them before. But we also saw that some of the more expected animals that you would see in Antarctica. So we saw some seals, some more gentoo penguins. They were everywhere. They were definitely one of my favorites. Thought this was a cool photo of him chanting out amazing sounds. Some chin-strap penguins. I think these ones are really cool. You can see why they're called chin-strap penguins, right? They've got this little strap, looks like they're holding on a helmet onto their head. And of course, we saw some whales. So this was one of the things that, and I think Sarah's talked about this as well, we were a bit nervous about going in kayaking because we'd heard the whales get quite friendly and we were a bit worried about them sort of popping up underneath our kayaks. But once you get in the water and you're sort of with the amazing creatures, I don't know, I found I wasn't scared anymore. It was just so incredible to be so close to these creatures and be visiting their home, but they were so, they were friendly and beautiful and yeah, really amazing experience. So here in the distance, you can see a minke whale. So pretty close to our kayak. They're one of the smaller whales that you'll see in Antarctica, but still at least twice the size of our kayaks. So pretty amazing experience. We also saw humpback whales as well. These ones we saw quite a lot actually. We were lucky enough to see them feeding and they get quite close to the zodiacs, which was, yeah, really, really cool. And I know in Anzac's call, someone asked about whether we saw a penguin hatching. As Anzac said, it was a little bit late in the year to be seeing the penguins hatching, but we did see a lot of penguins being fed by their parents, which was a super cool experience. So this is a bunch of photos from the same pair. I stood watching them for a while. You can see at this stage that the chick is almost as big as its parent. They're quite old at this point. I'll find a closer photo here. So they're quite old at this point, and the parents have been feeding them for a long time, and so the chicks are quite big. But you can see here that it's starting to lose its chick feathers. This pair was really funny to watch actually. the parent fed the chick for maybe 5 or 10 minutes and then clearly got sick of it and ran away, but the chick wanted more food and chased the parent right down to the water again. So really funny to watch. I thought since I went down as a composer and I'm talking about the sounds of nature, I'd also just include a quick slide about the ice that we saw there. So obviously there's heaps and heaps of ice in Antarctica, and what I was really interested in is seeing all the different types of ice that were around us. So this photo on the left is some brash ice. So that was what we were often kayaking through. So little bits that are broken off icebergs that are floating around or that have frozen in the cold. So that was really interesting. This middle one is a close-up of a glacier that was in the distance. And this big hunk of ice at the bottom of it had broken off. And we heard this humongous sound just echoing around the harbour, which is pretty incredible. The thing with those though is that sound carries so much slower than what you can see. So often by the time you hear the sound, the ice has already fallen. It was really amazing actually just witnessing that delay in sound as well. And then this photo on the right is an iceberg just in front of our kayak. The thing that was really important to be aware of when we were kayaking was not to get too close to the icebergs, because actually most of the iceberg is under the water. So if you get too close and it flips, then you're going to be having an iceberg come up under you. But I just thought I'd play a little clip from the photo on the left. That it's a recording that I took of the sound, and it was really interesting hearing the ice knocking up against our kayaks. And you can hear at the very end just a little bit of ice breaking off a small iceberg beside us. Yeah, so you can hear that little sizzle in the water of the ice. And that was something that was really interesting for me as a composer, realizing that the ice is actually quite a lot louder than you expect it to be. Often we'd kayak up relatively close to an iceberg and you could hear this cackle, this sizzle from the ice, the little ice bubbles in the air. Which was a bit scary at first. You sort of expect them to just be quiet, and then it's quite an overwhelming sound, but yeah, really incredible experience. So I want to leave lots of time for questions, but before we jump into questions, I just thought I'd thank you all for listening to our group over the last couple of weeks. I know we've talked about the introduction to the expedition, the theme of exploration, theme of environment, and now of nature. And we all really enjoyed sharing our experiences with you. So I just thought I'd say thank you on behalf of Owen and Zach, Lorette, Saja, myself, and the rest of the New Zealand Antarctic Heritage Trust. Thank you for including us in your experience.
Oh, it's wonderful, Lara. Thank you so much. What a great overview of your experience. And for anyone who is watching the live stream or watching the recording, it's so great to see where your experiences overlap with those of your fellow explorers and where your interests sort of went a different way in terms of the sounds in particular. And I have a bunch of questions about that. I'd encourage anyone who's watching the live stream, if you have a question, please put it in the live stream, or I'm sorry, in the chat bar, and I'll be happy to pass it along to Ihlara. But for now, Ihlara, I had a question. One of the first audio clips you played of the penguins doing a sort of call and response from the ridge at the top of what looked like a little canyon or inlet. One of the other things on that recording seemed like a constant maybe wind sound. Was wind a big source of sound or a constant source of sound for you?
Yeah, there was always, even just a slight breeze is often picked up in these recordings. So that was both interesting and challenging in taking recordings, because it can be not so ideal and distorting the penguin sounds and the ice sounds, but also absolutely it's really interesting for inspiration for music as well, because of course wind makes you think of the wind instruments of the orchestra, so you know, the flutes, the oboes, the clarinets, and also the brass, which have these amazing big wind sounds. So yeah, it was both frustrating at times, but also a really good inspiration for making music.
How did you go about recording these sounds? I'm sure you wanted to capture them so that you could listen to them again after the fact and use them as you were composing. Did you use special equipment, or is this something that other people who are interested in capturing the sounds around them could also do?
Yeah, so going down, I knew that I wanted to record sounds, but I also didn't want to overburden myself with equipment and feel like it was taking away from my personal experience. So I ended up just taking a couple of little handheld Zoom recorders. So I just had some foam to wrap around the top to try to minimize wind sounds. And some of the recordings turned out really well, really clear, some of them not so much. So I can use those not so good ones as sort of inspiration for myself. And then the ones that are really clear, I can incorporate more directly and use the live sounds.
Okay, very cool. Were there any sounds that were just completely unexpected for you, that you were just not anticipating, or that really struck you in a way that you weren't prepared for?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think those sizzling icebergs is something that I really didn't expect. I thought they'd just be these big silent giants, but the closer you got, the more obviously overwhelming in terms of their size they were, but also the sound that they were producing. So that was probably something that I was surprised at.
Yeah, very interesting. How about, were there any sort of human-made sounds that have entered into this narrative? I know the sound of kayaks going over ice or bumping into ice. Were there any other human-made sounds, or were really the dominant sounds of nature?
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of human sounds actually. And because obviously Antarctica is quite an unpredictable environment, we couldn't go off away from human sounds by ourselves. So most of my recordings have elements of human sound in it. But I think that was actually really interesting, especially when it's sounds of like penguins and seals. Having the merging of human voices was actually something I was trying to avoid, but ended up being something I really appreciated, sort of representing this special opportunity we have to visit these animals' worlds, their home.
All right. I'm always kind of curious, and I know a lot of our students are too, in the creative process. You as a composer are taking these experiences and you're going to turn it into a work of music. When you had your excursions off the ship and you were absorbing these new sounds and having these experiences, did you come right back to the ship and like have to write something down, or are you someone who sort of mulls it over and use some of your time in COVID-19 quarantine to compose, or is it something you've mostly processed since you've returned to New Zealand?
I think it was a bit of a mix. I definitely listened to the recording straight away. And I wrote a few notes on the boat, but I think most of the time I just wanted to seize the moment and learn as much as possible and see as much as I could. So I didn't do a whole lot of composing on the boat, although once we were moored at Ushuaia for the next week after the trip, I definitely got out my manuscript then. And now on return to New Zealand, I'm really lucky I live with a violinist. So I've been able to compose in reflection and get him to play some of the extracts.
Fantastic. And for our audience who may not know all the details, what are you planning to do as a product from your experience with these sounds?
Yeah, so I want to do a collection of works to try to showcase the range of sounds that we observed in Antarctica. So there is going to be a solo violin piece with electronics, so using some of those those better recordings that I took, as well as a solo flute piece. And then a work for youth orchestra, so for young people aged 12 to 16, incorporating the sounds from the recordings as well.
That is really neat. I hope that some of our young musicians who are watching today are thinking about maybe someday down the road playing your compositions and remembering you talking about where they came from. Maybe they'll arrive at some orchestras and bands in the United States.
That would be pretty amazing.
Beyond the music aspect of your expedition, what was your favorite part about being an explorer and going down to Antarctica?
Oh, there were so many. I think for me, one of the best things about the experience was the team that I was with. So I think it's really important to make the most of the people you're around and learn about each other's skills. And so that was really cool hearing, about Sadra's community work and how she was going to share her experience, and Lorette's work and policy and the environment, and Owain and his amazing educational program, and Anzac and his virtual reality recordings were just so phenomenal. And I think obviously the experience of exploring Antarctica was incredible and life-changing, but the best part was being able to reflect on that and learn and challenge each other.
That's a great answer. You and your expedition teammates have really shown North American students that explorers can really go into expeditions with all sorts of different goals and mindsets, and really the common denominator is just a curiosity about a place and an enthusiasm to learn more. And I think you're just another great example of someone who went into this expedition with that mindset.
Yeah, we were also really lucky to have some amazing supporters from the Antarctic Heritage Trust with us as well, and also some students from a local high school from Auckland. So we had this incredible age range in our team, and it was really great to share each other's experiences.
Well, awesome. Lara, I want to just ask sort of a final question here. Our YouTube audience is a little bit shy today. But I know that students in North America are going to be watching your video and having some questions, and we'll be sure to pass those along to you. But for my personal understanding and interest, I'd like to finish by asking our explorers, after you're free from COVID-19 restrictions, what will be your next adventure?
Ooh. Well, I think while we're in the restrictions, I definitely want to explore more of New Zealand. It's a really beautiful place. But once we can leave New Zealand, it's actually really close, the place I want to go. I'd love to go to Australia. My parents have just moved there, and I didn't have a chance to visit before COVID happened. But they've been telling me about all the amazing animals they've been seeing right on their doorstep. So I definitely want to go and explore rural Australia a little bit more.
All right, fantastic answer. Well, Lara, this has been so great talking to you today. I really want to thank you for joining us, and please pass along our appreciation to all the other inspiring explorers who did such a fantastic job of submitting articles as part of this virtual exchange and sharing their stories with us over video calls. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you all and learning about your expedition. And I really want to thank you again for doing that. For all of our live stream audience today, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you as part of this expedition. To anybody who's watching the recording, definitely go on and watch watch the article or read the articles that have been submitted as part of this virtual exchange. They're fantastic. We have Reach the World is getting ready for Oceans Week next week. So if you want to get a complete listing of upcoming Reach the World events, please check it out at athome.reachtheworld.org. And Lara, and to the rest of our inspiring explorers, thanks again, and best of luck to you all.
Thanks so much for having us.